Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So what about optimistic roll-ups? So optimistic roll-ups use something called fault proofs. The reason they are called optimistic is that when a new state root is added to an optimistic roll-up, the bridge contract corresponding to an optimistic roll-up, we are not sure if it is correct or not. So we optimistically think it is correct and we move forward, but at a later stage it can be proved faulty. Somebody can give something called a fault proof to prove that a state root was incorrect, then that state root will be rejected. So each state root is accompanied by an ETH deposit. So this is called the bond or the deposit or the stake. Some people call it a stake. For example, if in Arbitrum, the deposit when if I want to submit a new state root to Arbitrum, then I have to accompany it with a 5 Ether deposit, and 5 Ether now corresponds to around $6,000. If the state root is proved to be faulty, then the submitter of the state root will lose their deposit. And like in the previous lecture we saw, half of the deposit is burnt and the other half is given to the fault prover. So, and the reason for burning it is that again the submitter, somebody who submitted a faulty proof should not be proving their own fault and getting back their whole deposit. So you want to burn half of it. And once the state root is proved faulty, its successors are also marked as invalid, it is rejected. And like I said, if half the deposit is not burnt, then some people may want to delay the L2 chain progress at no cost, because when there is a fault proof mechanism being, the fault is being proved, there is some delay. Everybody is watching the chain to see what is the result of the fault proof. So some chain progress may be delayed because of a fault proof. So that's why we burn half the deposit to prevent malicious parties by just submitting faulty state roots and then proving the fault themselves. So the mechanism for proving faults is different in application specific and general purpose optimistic rollup. AS is for application specific and GP is general purpose. So application specific optimistic rollups, the state root can only be faulty in a finite number of ways. So they can be exhaustively enumerated. So there is you can prove that a state root is faulty using a small number of layer 1 transactions. For example, fuel V1 is a payments only optimistic rollup. It only supports payments. So if you have only payments, then the only kind of faults can be double spending or spending more coins than you have, and like a finite set of state changes which are allowed anyway in an application specific rollup. So the faults are also finite. So like double spending, invalid input, malformed block and so on. So if 2 L1 transactions are enough to prove faults. So you can have a first transaction which posts a hash of the fault proof to prevent front running. Front running is, suppose I submit a fault proof, then I am going to get like 2.5 ETH, which is half of this deposit because my fault proof was correct. Then somebody may pay higher fees and resubmit the same fault proof and take that 2.5. So front running is you try to go ahead of a transaction which is in the process of being included in a block. So the second L1 transaction posts the actual fault proof. So in application specific optimistic rollups, a small number of transactions are enough to prove faults. But in general purpose optimistic rollups, we need to play an interactive game between the prover and the verifier, or in this case the challenger and the prover. So let's look at the mechanism, this interactive game in optimistic rollups. So general purpose rollups support arbitrary contracts. So if you have an optimistic rollup, if it is general purpose, it will have arbitrary contracts on it. So you can install contracts on it. The challenge is that it is infeasible to enumerate all possible ways in which a fault can be present in a general purpose optimistic rollup. That is, all possible ways in which a state root can be faulty. So setup is you have an asserter. So there will be a party which will post a new state root to the bridge contract, and then there is a challenger. The challenger will say that no, the state root you posted is incorrect, and they were going to play an interactive game, but they both agree on the previous state root. So if they don't agree on the previous state root, then the challenger will challenge that previous state root. So the setup is that there is a previous state root R previous, which everybody agrees is fine, but the asserter says that the new state root is R new, but the challenger says no, it is not correct. The challenger will claim that there is a new state root RCH new, which should be the next root after a particular layer 2 block is executed. But both agree on the layer 2 block of transactions, because this is the layer 2 block of transactions is posted as call data on the Ethereum main chain. So they both know that the block for which the block which is executed after R previous state root is a particular set of transactions, sequence of transactions. So the asserter's claim is, from R previous, if you execute some block of transactions, you get R new as a new state root. But the challenger is saying no, that's not true. From R previous, if you execute the same block of transactions, you are going to get R new superscript CH, or let us call it RCH new. So this is the setup. So the asserter and the challenger have different views of the layer 2 blockchain. Asserter is claiming that R new is a new state root, but the challenger is saying no, it is not the new state root, there is some other state root which is RCH new. But the block of transactions, they both agree on that, and this is fixed because this will be posted as call data. L2 blocks are posted as call data, so this will be fixed. And it consists of a sequence of opcodes, op1, op2, these are all opcodes, some n opcodes, let us say. So the fault proof strategy is that you identify the first layer 2 opcode where the fault occurs, and you prove that fault on chain. And the main insight is that the number of opcodes is limited. So the number of opcodes may be 256, that is a small number of opcodes. So they can be exhaustively enumerated, and you will say that okay, I know the first opcode at which our state roots diverged, let us identify that first, and then for the inputs are known because the inputs are the layer 2 transactions. So the inputs to the opcode are known. Then for the same inputs and same opcode, the challenger and the asserter will differ in what the new output is. And once you identify that, opcode is actually executed in the bridge contract, and the bridge contract can verify whose claim is correct. Is it the challenger or the asserter? So to find the first opcode, the challenger and the asserter are going to play something called a bisection game. Let us look at what that bisection game is. It is an interactive game for proving faults. So the interactive game has two stages. One is an n-ary search. It is not bisection, it is n-ary search. So if it was binary search, it would be a bisection, but it can be an n-ary search. So what you are going to do is you are going to divide this opcodes op1 to op1 n, and they are going to search, do an n-ary search to identify the first opcode where the challenger and the asserter disagree. And then once you identify the first opcode, then you will just do a one-step proof. The bridge contract will execute that one particular opcode, and you will figure out who is correct and who is wrong. So in the n-ary search stage, the challenger first publishes intermediate state roots between R previous and R new CH. So let me show a picture here. So you have this op1 to op-n is the set of all opcodes in that layer 2 block. These are all L2 opcodes. R previous was the previous state root on which both the challenger and the asserter they have agreed on. And then the challenger says it's RCH new is the new root, and asserter says it's R new. So there must be some state root in between where they disagree. If there was no state root where they disagreed, then it can't be that these two are different. So either they disagreed in the last state root or they disagree in some previous state root. So both the challenger and the receiver are trying to find out where the disagreement first occurs. And the root locations are chosen such that the amount of computation is almost equal in all these batches. So there is some place where there is a first state root, there is at least one state root where they disagree, and there will always be a first. So the asserter will choose the first root where it disagrees from the challenger, and it will publish n-1 state roots between that and the previous one. So let us say Ri is the first state root where they disagree, then it will choose the previous one Ri-1 and it will publish n-1 state roots between that. So let us suppose R2 is the first state root where they disagree. I will have a picture here. So this is the first stage. You had R previous to R new or RCH new. It was divided into n blocks or n partitions. Then suppose R2 is the first location, first state root where the challenger and the asserter disagree. Now that portion of opcodes that is divided further into n parts. So this is R1 I have put here, R2 I have put here, and now the asserter will publish. So the challenger did the first set of publishing. So challenger published these intermediate state roots. Now the asserter will publish the intermediate state roots between R1 and R2, where in this example R2 is the first state root where they disagree. And this process keeps going, this n-ary search keeps going until they identify the first opcode where they both differ. And it alternates between the challenger and the asserter, because this publishing of state roots, this is happening on layer 1. So whoever publishes, they have to actually pay the layer 1 fees, so that is expensive. So if you only had one party to do that, then that would not be fair. So you have this alternating between the challenger and the asserter. At the end, a single layer 2 opcode is identified, and both parties will agree on the input to this opcode, but they disagree on the output. So this one step proof is now re-executed in a L1 contract. So the number of layer 2 opcode is limited. There may be 256 possible opcodes, like add is an opcode, multiply is an opcode. So once they identify which opcode it is, they already have identified the inputs to that opcode, then they will just run that opcode in the layer 1 contract and identify the winner. And the losing party's deposit is confiscated. So when a challenger challenges the state root, it also has to put in a deposit. Otherwise it has nothing to lose. So it will also put in a deposit, and whoever is the losing party, their deposit is confiscated and the winner is rewarded. So the interactive game in pictorial form, what I just described, it goes like this. So the asserter publishes a state root, and then it publishes state root R new. R previous was the previous state root, nobody disputes that. Then it publishes a new state root R new. Then the challenger says, no, there is something wrong with your new state root. I am going to publish n-1 intermediate state roots between R previous and R new. And then the asserter now publishes, finds the first state root where they both disagree, and then it will publish intermediate state roots between that. Then this keeps going, intermediate state roots again, and then finally there is a one step proof. Once the location of the first opcode, or the first opcode where they differ is identified, then they will just send a one step proof. And this fault proof protocol, it involves multiple L1 transactions, and that can be censored by malicious miners. So because of to avoid censorship, the asserter and the challenger are given 1 week of time in a chess style clock. So chess style in the sense, when one player is playing, their time is running, and when they stop, when it's the other player's turn, this player's clock stops. So they have about the entire fault proof protocol can take up to 2 weeks. This 2 weeks time is because there can be censorship, or maybe there is congestion in the network. Sometimes when there is some there is a high demand, maybe there is some particular application on Ethereum which is become very popular, and everybody is trying to make some money by using that application. Maybe it's some kind of NFT drop, you have to claim that by sending a transaction. Then there may be a lot of activity on Ethereum network. Then the fees on Ethereum can go up, can become high, and then if the fees are high, it may not be feasible, no pun intended, it may not be feasible to send these intermediate state roots here. So because of this, they just came up with this just a arbitrary amount of time. It is 1 week of time for each player, each party, and it is a whole of 2 weeks for the fault protocol to go through. Okay, and if nobody challenges a state root for 1 week, it is considered finalized. So that is the mechanism. So any questions about this? So the question was that, is the challenger a smart contract on Ethereum? It will be just a externally owned account, just some public key. But most of the roller projects will have to give you software for doing this, to initiate the actions of a challenger easily. So this generating of this intermediate state roots, if I am a non-technical user, that is not easy. So how do I know what are the intermediate state roots? I need some software to run that. So hopefully this will be automated, that I just need to have enough ether to pay the deposit to challenge, and then the process of generating these intermediate state roots will be just running some command and then sending the intermediate state roots.
So sir, that software is provided by?
The software for generating these intermediate state roots would have to be provided by the rollup operator themselves. Okay, so what is the rollup user experience like? So the rollup user experience, the first step is always before you can transact on layer 2, you need to have some ether on layer 2, otherwise you can't pay the fees. Layer 2 also is a separate blockchain, it has fees, because if there is no fees, again there will be spam. So your layer 1 ether has to be first deposited into layer 2. So the first step is always depositing layer 1 tokens to layer 2. So you deposit tokens to the bridge contract. So that is what I showed you earlier. There was some 45,000 ether in the Optimism's bridge contract. You deposit tokens, and then once you deposit, then the rollup operator will read deposit transactions. It will create an L2 block which includes, and it will mint the equivalent amount of tokens on layer 2. Then that block, the state root of that block will be sent to the bridge contract, and then that once that state root is verified, it will be the user balance will be updated. So typically it takes about an hour. So in the previous deposit we did, that took about 20 minutes to go from layer 1 to layer 2. So do you need to wait 7 days for your deposit to go through? So the 7-day waiting period in optimistic rollups does not apply to layer 1 deposits. So we need a fault proof only when we don't know, we don't have access to the transaction. So layer 2 transactions, the layer 1 contract has no visibility into what is happening on layer 2. It only sees a state root. So that's why you need that 7-day waiting period to challenge the state root. But the bridge contract, the layer 1 can see the deposit. So deposit is happening on layer 1. So it can read the deposit, it knows everything about the deposit. So those transactions, there is no fault which can happen because of those transactions. So those are, they don't have a 7-day waiting period. And so that is like step one of the rollup user experience. The reason I say rollup user experience is I want to bring your attention to the parts where the user experience is going to be degraded. There is going to be some latency, some extra onboarding steps. So here is an extra onboarding step. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, if the fault detection process takes 7 days, how is it possible that it runs in 1 hour or 20 minutes?
Yeah, so the question was, if the fault detection process takes 7 days, why does a deposit come in 1 hour? So again, to repeat what I said before, the fault detection process, the fault detection is, fault proof is required because the layer 1 contract, the bridge contract, does not know what is happening on layer 2 because it's just a smart contract. Layer 2 has its own blockchain, some transactions are happening. But the layer 1 contract can see the deposit happening because this deposit of tokens is a layer 1 transaction. So there is nothing faulty which can happen because it can read all the details of the deposit.
So that process is not involved in detecting the fault.
Yeah, so it is not required because there is no way that the state root can be faulty for deposit transactions, because deposit transactions can be read by the layer 1 contract, so it knows all the details of it. So layer 2 is like you can say it's opaque to the layer 1 contract. The bridge contract cannot see what is happening in layer 2. So layer 2 transactions could be faulty, but deposit is a layer 1 transaction. It is happening on main Ethereum. So that is why it is not required. Okay. So here is the second step in the rollup user experience. It applies only to these validity rollups, also called ZK rollups. So there is setting up of this layer 2 public key. This is again an extra onboarding step if you want to use validity rollups. So the validity rollups use zero knowledge proofs to prove correctness of the state roots, and for efficiency reasons, if the layer 2 public key is from a pairing friendly curve, then it becomes cheaper. So this kind of extra onboarding step is required in ZK Sync 1.0 and Polygon Hermes 1.0. It is not needed in the ZK EVMs, which are the general purpose validity rollups. So what is the setting up involved in? So the layer 2 user wallet will send a set public key transaction, and this costs layer 2 fees, not layer 1 fees, which is much lower. And then once the block is confirmed, then the public key change is confirmed. So block is confirmed means you create an L2 block, you send that L2 block and state root to the bridge contract, you generate a validity proof, and then you send the transition proof. The proof is verified on the bridge contract. This proof verifies that a transition, by transition I mean root transition from R previous to R current, or from R current to R new, and then once it is verified, then the public key is set. But this is an extra onboarding step in ZK 1.0 and Polygon Hermes 1.0. So the layer 2, once that state is finalized, then the layer 2 wallet will get a confirmation. So this is one part, an extra onboarding step in validity rollups. So what is most of the users will be doing this step 3, which is transacting on layer 2. So layer 2 transacting, it just involves, so from your layer 2 wallet you will send a transfer transaction, so in a regular Ethereum, transactions are sent to the peer-to-peer network. They are not sent to a particular entity, they are sent to the peer-to-peer network and the transaction is broadcast everywhere. Here the transaction has to be sent to the operator's RPC endpoint. There is a single point of control here, you can say. It is sent to the operator's RPC endpoint, and that RPC endpoint, so again there is no P2P network on layer 2. Then the rollup operator will create the blocks, they will post the call data, layer 2 blocks as call data, send the layer 2 state roots, it will get verified, and then the user balance will be updated. So this is how the transaction process on layer 2 works. So layer 2's users will experience a latency between transaction submission and finalization. So that is the trade-off. So the trade-off is that there is so this process, if I send a transfer transaction on layer 1, it takes about 13 seconds to get included in a block. But on layer 2, all these processes need to happen, only then the balance will get updated. So this is the fundamental trade-off of rollups. So you are going to get cheaper fees, but it will take longer for your transaction to get confirmed. So that is the main trade-off. And validity and optimistic rollups, they have different L2 transaction finalization trust models and latency. So how long does it take to finalize a layer 2 transaction? So it's different for different rollup technologies, validity rollups and optimistic rollups. So validity rollups, the layer 2 transactions are finalized once the proofs are verified on chain. So how long does it take to verify a proof on chain? Anything you do on chain, by on chain I mean on mainnet, Ethereum mainnet on layer 1, anything you do there, it costs money. So to amortize the on chain verification fees, several layer 2 state roots will be bunched together and they will be verified together. So for ZK Sync 1.0 the latency is about 1 hour. For StarkX the latency is about 7 to 10 hours. So every 7 to 10 hours they do a verification on Ethereum main chain. So latency can be as long as 10 hours. For Polygon Hermes 1.0 the latency is about 6 hours. So this is for validity rollups, but once verified then there is no fault, because the zero knowledge proof proves that the state transition is correct, so there will not be any fault proof after that. So once it is verified then it is finalized. But optimistic rollups, there is a trade-off, there is a spectrum of trust models and finalization latencies. So one-off end trust model, suppose there is at least one honest party that can submit a fault proof. Then the L2 transactions are finalized if no challenges are done in the 7-day period where the challenge period is open. And the latency is about 7 days. So if I do a transaction, I can only be confident that the transaction is correct only after 7 days. That's a very long time period. But most users use this one-of-one trust model. So they trust either the user trusts the rollup operator, or they trust a party that reads the sequence of L2 blocks and calculates the L2 state. So an example of such a party can be like a layer 2 wallet. Suppose there is a layer 2 wallet you trust, then that layer 2 wallet will read all the sequence of L2 blocks which are submitted to the bridge contract, because they are submitted as call data to the layer 1 bridge contract, and they can recalculate the layer 2 state. So the sequence of layer 2 blocks is frozen once the transactions in the call data transactions have enough confirmations. So if the trusted party or layer 2 wallet confirms that the state roots are correct, the user will accept them as final. So an example of this is like an L2 wallet provider. So in this case the latency is a few minutes. The few minutes is the L1 confirmation time. By L1 confirmation time, what I mean is, suppose a sequence of L2 blocks was included in an Ethereum block on layer 1. Each new block takes about 13 seconds. So if in a few minutes you will have some few tens of blocks which is built upon that call data block, and once it is confirmed, you can be sure of the sequence of layer 2 transactions, and then you can be confident that the layer 2 root is correct. So here, so if you have one of n trust model in optimistic rollups, you have to wait 7 days to be sure that your transaction was correct or went through correctly. But if you have one of one trust model, which most layer 2 users have this one of one trust model, they trust some layer 2 wallet provider, then in a few minutes your transaction will get confirmed. So instead of 13 seconds, if you are willing to wait for a few minutes, then you will pay much less fees on layer 2. There is also something called a sequencer mode, which is only the sequencer is allowed to add layer 2 blocks and user trusts the sequencer. So here it is user trusts the sequencer or some other party, but if the user trusts the sequencer completely, then the latency is only a few seconds. Even before the call data is posted on layer 1, the sequencer can send you a layer 2 state route, and if you trust the sequencer, then you will just say that okay, my transaction has been included in a particular state whose state route is available to me. So in this case the latency is only a few seconds. So sometimes users may, suppose I feel that Optimism is a reliable company, then I may be fine as long as Optimism, once I submit my layer 2 transaction, if Optimism responds and says that I have received your transaction, the Optimism RPC gateway says I have received your transaction, then you can go ahead with whatever real world actions. Like real world action can be that maybe I am selling something for layer 2 ether. As soon as I see that layer 2 ether has been transferred by the buyer, then I will part with my goods or services. So then what is the roll-up experience for withdrawal? So deposits, I said you from layer 1 it goes to layer 2, but withdrawal is from layer 2 to layer 1. So in validity roll-ups, again it is layer 2 wallet will send a withdrawal transaction that will be included in a block. I put this in grey because this process is the same as before. So as soon as the proof is verified on chain, the latency can be sometimes 7 hours, 10 hours, can be 6 hours, or it can be 1 hour. Then once the state route is verified on chain, you send a withdrawal transaction and the tokens are transferred to you. So from layer 2, if you want to withdraw to layer 1, it is expensive. So you don't want to do it often. Typically you transfer your assets to layer 2, stay on layer 2 for as much as possible, and then do withdrawals only at a later stage, because the withdrawal transaction will cost layer 1 fees. And withdrawals from layer 2 to layer 1, so this was for validity rollups, like ZK rollups. In optimistic rollups, there are two scenarios. There is something called a liquidity provider or an LP. Liquidity providers can speed up your withdrawal, but without liquidity providers we look at first. Suppose there is no liquidity provider, then the user sends a layer 2 withdrawal transaction, the blocks are created, state routes are posted. After 7 days, if there is no challenge on that withdrawal transaction state route, then the withdrawal transaction is confirmed, then the user will send a L1 withdrawal transaction. The bridge contract will check, have 7 days passed without challenge for that L2 withdrawal, and then they will transfer, the bridge contract will transfer the tokens back to the L1 user wallet. This is without liquidity provider, so it takes 7 days to withdraw your assets from optimistic rollups. But if you have a liquidity provider, I have a new entity here, LP, liquidity provider L1 wallet. So the liquidity provider will speed up your withdrawals on optimistic rollups for a fee. So instead of waiting for 7 days, suppose I am in a hurry, I want my tokens which are on layer 2 or ether which is on layer 2, I want it on layer 1 immediately. Then you are willing to pay some fees for that speed up. Then the liquidity provider will reduce the withdrawal times from 7 days to a few minutes. And the way it works is that the user will send their on layer 2, they will not transfer they will not ask for a withdrawal, they will transfer to the liquidity provider's L2 address. So they will transfer tokens on layer 2 to the liquidity provider's layer 2 address. So you have to trust the layer 2, you have to trust the liquidity provider to not steal your tokens. Then that block gets included in a state route, that is, and as long as the transaction which posts the layer 2 blocks as call data, it has enough confirmations, which is a few minutes, then the liquidity provider is confident that the transaction which was sending tokens, which are transferring tokens to its own layer 2 address will eventually get confirmed. So they will then transfer an amount equal to what was received on layer 2 minus some fees for providing this service to the L1 user's wallet. So this is the liquidity provider's L1 wallet. So the layer 2, the user has transferred funds to the liquidity provider's L2 address, and then the liquidity provider says, okay, I have received 1 ether on my layer 2, and I am confident that it will get confirmed eventually after 7 days. So let me send 0.95 ether to the user. 0.05 ether is my fees for providing this service. So the withdrawal time is reduced from 7 days to just a few minutes. This all the steps I showed before, all the initiation is that you send your transaction to the rollup operator's RPC endpoint. So the rollup operator can censor transactions. It's a single entity. It's not a trustless model, because in main Ethereum, miners include your transactions into the blocks. So if one miner is refusing transactions, some other miner will take your transactions. So there are multiple miners, anybody can take your transactions. In here in rollups, because the layer 2 is controlled or it's coordinated by the rollup operator, the rollup operator can censor you on layer 2. So maybe you are trying to do some transfer, but the rollup operator does not like your IP address. Maybe if you are from a country which is sanctioned by the particular government where the rollup operator is operating, so they refuse to take your layer 2 transaction. So what is the recourse? Because you have transferred your layer 1 assets to layer 2, sometimes you may want to withdraw them. So if you are you may want to do some operations on layer 2, but if it is censored, then your layer 2 assets become useless. So then rollups, they always offer a slow path to force include your layer 2 transactions. So Arbitrum, for example, allows you to include any arbitrary layer 2 transactions in the slow path, and ZK Sync allows only asset withdrawals. So the slow path is actually a layer 1 transaction, so it costs layer 1 fees. So people don't use it unless they are being censored. So suppose it's a ZK Sync rollup, and the user is being censored, so they request a asset withdrawal. They're saying that I don't want to use ZK Sync anymore, I want to withdraw my assets back to layer 1. So the rollup operator has to read these slow path transactions, and they will and the operator is forced to include slow path transactions within a deadline. So how is it forced? So the bridge contract has logic which does not accept state roots which don't have slow path transactions. So slow path transactions are included in the bridge contract. They are seen by the bridge contract. So after a deadline, it will give you a deadline of maybe like within 1 day, within 24 hours, layer 2 blocks have to include those slow path transactions. If they don't include those slow path transactions, then they'll not be allowed, they'll be rejected. So the operator is forced to include slow path transactions within a deadline. And because of that, even if the rollup operator is censoring transactions on the RPC endpoints, they will be forced to include that asset withdrawal, and eventually that asset withdrawal will get confirmed and the tokens will be transferred back to the user. So this is one kind of censorship, or one kind of failure mode, censorship by the operator on layer 2. But the disadvantage or a con of this is that there is delays, and because this you have to wait for longer for your withdrawal to happen, and also you have to pay 2 layer 1 transaction fees, one to request the asset withdrawal and the other to send the withdrawal transaction itself. The other issue is that you can have an offline operator. So an operator may just go offline, maybe they are malicious, maybe they just went offline because of some other reason. So in this case, the bridge contract is not accepting any new blocks. In this case, ZK Sync has something called a full exit, where users can request a full exit of their assets, and once a full exit is requested, then no layer 2 blocks are allowed. After a 14-day time period, anyone can activate something called exodus mode, and all users can generate a ZK or a zero knowledge proof, a validity proof that they own some assets on layer 2, and then they will exit their assets. They will send an exodus transaction and they will get their tokens transferred. So this is to deal with the offline operator in the sense that if this guy stops working for whatever reason, then how do you get your assets from layer 2 back to layer 1? And this is for validity rollups. For optimistic rollups, they also have a mechanism. So in Arbitrum, they have a slow path transaction, and that slow path transaction inclusion, it does not require the rollup operator. So the rollup operator goes offline, the slow path transaction is included. After a 1-day delay, you can force include that slow path transaction in an L2 block. You can create the L2 block in the bridge contract itself, and after 7 days it will be confirmed. Because it's an optimistic rollup, it requires 7 days. If nobody challenges that layer 2 state root for 7 days, then you can it gets confirmed and you can withdraw your assets from your bridge contract. So the effect of miner censorship, so the miners or now with Ethereum 2.0 you have these stakers, they can also censor transactions. So transactions which are submitted to the bridge contract could be censored by the miners, or in this case block producers. And also congestion on Ethereum, suppose there is a lot of congestion on Ethereum layer 1, that can cause censorship on the bridge contract transactions. So if no new L2 state roots are submitted, then the L2 chain will stop progress, there won't be any layer 2 blockchain will stop. In validity rollups, only the liveness of the chain is affected, that is no new transactions will be happening, but the funds are secure. But on and censorship by L1 miners is indistinguishable from an offline operator, so eventually you can get your funds back. Optimistic rollups, if optimistic rollups you require that interactive game to work for fault proofs. But if there is censorship on layer 1, if Ethereum transactions cannot be launched to launch the fault proof, then both liveness and security are affected. That suppose the fault proof cannot be executed on layer 1, then a faulty state root can get confirmed. That is, if fault proof transactions are censored for 1 week, an invalid state root can be confirmed. So that is a problem with optimistic rollups. It's unlikely, but it is possible. So the but if suppose it happens, suppose a faulty state root was confirmed because of some network congestion and some very unlikely scenarios, then what would need to happen is that the operator would need to clone the bridge contract state and restart operation from a correct state. So yeah, this is the state, the L2 blockchain is a linear list, and so let's say one state root which is an incorrect state root got confirmed, then you need to restart the blockchain from a correct state root. So you'll have to clone the bridge contract, all the data is available because all the L2 blocks are available on the Ethereum logs, you don't have to depend on the rollup operator. So you can restart operation from a correct state. So that's all I had. To be fair, even though it looks like optimistic rollups security is affected, but here only liveness is affected. To be fair, at the current state of Ethereum, in the current state of Ethereum, optimistic rollups offer much more functionality. They have many more applications on layer 2 than validity rollups. ZK EVMs, which are general purpose rollups, as of now are being launched, and Starknet is a validity general purpose validity rollup which allows arbitrary contracts, but it requires you to write your contracts in a special language called Cairo, and because of that there is some friction for users to launch new applications. But the ZK EVMs like Polygon ZK EVM or Scrolls ZK EVM, they allow you to write your contracts in Solidity, so they will be easier from a developer experience point of view. So people are hoping that they will become live soon and they will see a lot of adoption. So that's all I had. So thanks for your attention. Thank you.